We are now on to the lead paper on long-term social impacts of COVID-19 on education. And I'm very pleased to invite Dr. Upali Sedere, who is the Secretary of the State Ministry of Education Reforms, Open Universities and Distance Learning Promotion of Sri Lanka. He also serves as the Chief Executive Officer and the Rector of the Sri Lanka International Buddhist Academy at Pallekele in Sri Lanka. He's the author of the book, Reforming Education, Globalization and Low-Income Economies and the Crisis of Vision, which is a prescribed text in many universities in the world over. His other more recent book, Education Meeting Knowledge Economy, the 21st Century Expectations, has been well received internationally. Dr. Sedere has over 100 refereed publications and has served about 20 years in Sri Lankan universities. He was also the Director General of the National Institute of Education in 2009 and 2010. He worked with the United Nations in about 1987, but has been with the World Bank in 1991 as an education sector project monitor. I know he's very busy right now on educational reforms, and I'm pleased to invite Dr. Sedere for the presentation.
Thank you, Ranjit. Happy to be here, and I know distinguished set of participants. I was listening to the previous presentations and was very happy to hear those presentations. Should I share mine or you are going to put it, or do I have to put it? Do you see the screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now it's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will be brief.
You can see this.
And you know, this is the pandemic that really perhaps had the biggest impact on economy and education. Although all the UN findings, health findings indicated that children are the least affected and they had the best resilience for the disease, yet schools had to be closed because the particular reason is that mothers, particularly the parents, didn't want to take the risk of sending children to school. I remember when the very first case was found in Sri Lanka, the same day people panicked to remove children from their schools, and immediately that evening we had to decide to close the schools. So actually taking the numbers into account, you can see the position of UNESCO as well as UNICEF had been that, you know, the children are the least affected by the disease. Therefore, education perhaps could have been continued, but you know, the public image was different. So the pandemic had a lasting impact on education. This is data that I have collected from UNICEF and UNESCO data. I have seen in a previous publication also another speaker used this chart. You can see that the number of days the schools are fully closed. Here, Sri Lanka is the last country here listed, is 141 days. Our schools were fully closed. And another 37 days, schools were partially closed. But we were not the worst. Here you can see that the Bangladesh had 198 days fully closed. So was Myanmar, Philippines, many other countries were fully closed for a longer period than this. Sri Lanka, time to time, had partial opening, full open again for a short time, and then had to close with the second wave, and then partial opening again. So now the schools came to normal running on November 8th, but somehow we know we were afraid of the third wave, and with that again, we had to close school. Vacation was around the corner, but we decided to close it early. Actual fact is that, you know, we were again scared whether the disease would spread faster. So now, of course, the examinations have been conducted. It is going on, and very likely on March 7th, we are reopening as we have scheduled. Anyway, what are the implications of these schools closer is what matters actually. You can also see many countries, according to UNESCO, their investment in education was anyway low even before COVID-19 pandemic. Sri Lanka was among one of these countries these countries. You see, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Cambodia were below the average investment in education. But with the pandemic, you can see this is also again UNESCO material. You can see that the GDP growth really went into minus values. Sri Lanka is again, this red color is one of them. Worst hit was Maldives. Then India, Philippines, all they had minus growth, except few countries in Asia like Bangladesh had the still it was a plus GDP growth in Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, Vietnam, and other places. There are lessons to learn from this also, because the Sri Lanka was also the Maldives worst hit countries among them, because our economy is almost 68% or 66 to 68% of our economy depends on service industries, not the not the industries. That is the reason, opposed to Bangladesh. If you take, Bangladesh was in the historically a more vulnerable country than us, but today doing well because Bangladesh has a very smaller service sector compared to Sri Lanka, but the industrial sector is growing quite fast. The Sri Lanka, whereas we are basically based on services, and when this kind of a pandemic comes, when restrictions come, particularly the COVID curfew and all those things, economy totally derailed because the people lost employment and there was no opportunities to earn. The daily wage earner was lost, but still, many countries where having the pandemic, industrial countries continued to open their factories with restricted conditions. So this is a thing that we also have to learn in Sri Lanka. Also, I mean, too much of dependence on service sector is not going to be a healthy thing. The same thing happened to Maldives because they were basically on tourism. Their economy was on tourism. Same in Sri Lanka. I mean, we were largely depending on tourism and other service sectors. Now, when it comes to post-COVID situation, because we have to take the baseline into account, many countries already had a learning poverty component in the system, because many people could not. I can remember a study done in India, for instance, that after 3 years or 4 years of schooling, there was a large number, around 40% of children in India, in particularly rural areas where, the weaker communities, that children could not read 2-3 words at a stretch, even after 3 years, 4 years of schooling. That was not the case in Sri Lanka. In that study, actually, we found that Sri Lanka had this situation much less than in other countries, because our literacy rates are actually more than literacy. Sri Lanka is an educated country where, young mothers who send children to school today, if you take them, at least 85% of them have completed at least junior secondary 11 years of schooling. So these are healthy things, and these are things that we need to take to account, because when a pandemic comes, just like that, the Professor Lin from Hong Kong, her presentation was fantastic in my thinking. It was, what she was telling is that, it is the population characteristics, the demographic matters a lot. For this kind of the control of this kind of pandemic, even in Sri Lanka, why we could curtail the first wave, second wave successfully, and even vaccination campaign successfully implemented, particularly for the first dose and the second dose, because we have a highly educated society. So the education is the strength in this. So even post-COVID situation, we still believe the retention of learning in Sri Lankan context is better than in other places. Even the World Bank study, which shows that you can read this proportion of 10-year-olds unable to read a short age-appropriate text was 53% in low in the middle-income countries prior to COVID-19, compared to only 9% of high-income countries. In Sri Lanka, the estimate is 15%. The other countries, it was 50%, whereas Sri Lanka, it was only 15%. So we are in a better wicket when it comes to better situation, when it comes to education and achievement. But we know when the schools were closed for 141 days fully, and again partially for a few more years, situation has now, perhaps we have to re-estimate, because we do not know the actual situation of these things, because not enough research is done. Now here is actually the situation in education. Why I say this, show this is, we all know that with the pandemic, we had to look for new avenues of learning. We are quite used to formal schooling and face-to-face teaching by a teacher to the students. This has to totally look for new avenues now. All of a sudden, overnight, we had to face the challenge. Now, when it comes to the media, so the media became very important. Sri Lanka was fortunate that in usually South Asia, only about 60%, 66% televisions are available. Now in Sri Lankan homes, if you take over 90% of the Sri Lankan homes do have a television, That's a big advantage. Now, when it comes to TV, tablets, smartphones, and all these things together, again, Sri Lanka was around 90%. But we know the television is not the best for learning. This is only, perhaps, even if you take the radio coverage, even Sri Lanka, we use radio for teaching, but still, that is a weaker way of reaching children. But the most important things that the radio, smartphone, and internet, the Sri Lanka, when the COVID started, our rates were around 30, 35%, 40% was the maximum, which is, of course, is a lot better than many other countries. Like Pakistan was 13%, Nepal was around that 13, 14%, Bangladesh was 17%, and we had a fairly high rate. There again, we were better. So with this, how we manage learning is what is important now. When it comes to the educational reform work also going on, the first thing affected was the schooling. The only approach that we were left with was distance learning. I don't know why our government decided, the ministry that I am the secretary, the new government named it as State Ministry for Educational Reforms, Open Universities and Distance Learning, promotion of distance learning. There was no COVID when this title was given. This is the first time it was given. And we had we were fortunate because we had this mandate to go for distance learning promotion. So it is an interesting story if I tell. We call the media ministry helped us a lot. So collectively, we called all the media service agencies, including the radio, and begged for their time. But you see, it was very difficult to get time from any service provider because they had programs fully loaded. But somehow Rupavahini Corporation as a national channel came for the help, and they offered 2 channels, Netra and I channels for Tamil and Sinhala, both media. 16 hours telecast we started, but when we say telecast started, this is not just telecast. To do that, we needed 6 television studios and to produce at least 36 lessons a day, minimum. So the health curfew was declared. There was no way of moving teachers, and the homes did not allow the teachers their mothers, or mostly our teachers are females. The homes did not want to send the mother taking this risk. So with these all difficulties, and we didn't have 6 television channels. The National Institute of Education is responsible for curriculum and dissemination of curriculum. They had only 1 studio. So we borrowed the Open University studio and another private university studio, one in Jaffna, and somehow made temporary studios and managed to telecast. 36 lessons were produced daily, actually providing food, transport, everything with curfew passes. We managed to reach the children through television because television was the only thing that reached most of the homes. Then the other important thing was we had e-Taksalava as the national digital platform, but it was never recognized like that. But government immediately gave us the clearance, and it was recognized as the national platform. And e-Taksalava, we again recorded many lessons in both Sinhala and Tamil medium, and to a certain extent English medium, and provided many lessons on e-Taksalava. So that was going on. At the same time, the children, grade 1 and 2, we were worried about them because nothing, no programs were reaching them. And I was particularly worried about it because I know these are the critical years for literacy, the basic things. So the UNICEF came handy, and Sri Lanka UNICEF helped us. Then we worked on home-based learning material and produced two workbooks actually. And with UNICEF assistance, we managed to distribute these books to every child's home we delivered it. So we facilitated in various ways. Schools found various ways of putting teachers to facilitate this process. So then the critical thing was, GCO level, A level examinations were there, and there was no way to conduct them. When the first wave was came under control, immediately managed to keep the two examinations. These are public examinations. A lot of people are waiting for these things to happen. So that was another big success story, during the pandemic, how we managed to conduct the whole examinations. There were shortcomings, but we were very happy that, the children could sit for it. The most important thing is the tremendous progress that we achieved in distance learning. Today, that e-Taksalava national platform, it also has the learning management system as well by now. Over 5 million hits we get every day. There are over 90,000 lessons from grade 1 to grade 13 in Sinhala, Tamil, and English medium. So this is a huge achievement. Now actually, as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, our future is better. Now actually, with the new curriculum reforms, we are going for blended learning. We are not just going for teacher face-to-face teaching. We are trying to deviate from that and go for blended learning, mixture of many ways of learning. So that activity is taking root and making further progress very well. Actually, right now, we are planning to, during this COVID period, still we are under a threat. We are now developing teacher training material to train all our school teachers on blended learning mechanism. And we are using e-Taksalava as well as other digital media to reach all teachers. What has happened today is actually, I presented to you earlier that we had only 40% internet coverage. This expanded. Now it has at least near 60% coverage is there, because people are seeking for it, and service providers, ICTA particularly, as well as the TRC, Telecommunications Regulatory Authority. There were certain personalities who really went out of the way to help this situation. I'm also showing you these NANSL centers. These NANSL centers are actually, if you remember, there were places, there were no signals, and children were climbing hills and up to the trees, up on the trees to get signals. That now nobody talks about these things. The reason is, with the help of TRC and ICTA, we did the mapping of all the places where there was no telecommunication, internet connections. And accordingly, we set up over 3,000 NANSL centers with 10 tabs free, for children can come to those centers and study. So we appointed one teacher to manage that center, and those centers actually allocated time to students as the demand as the demand comes. So these things help a lot to take internet to the village. Then also the Guru Gedara program that on the television, we have now grade 1 to 13, 80,000 lessons. These on iChannel and Channel Netra on Rupahini. Beside that, all other television service providers, the Swarna Vahini, then Siyata, all these channels came and offered few hours of education for various grade levels. One selected mathematics, the other one selected science, some selected primary, ITN selected primary. Like that, various people join the process of giving education on digital media. Now, actually, what is good thing has happened as a result of these ventures. Now, the Ministry of Education, our ministry has television streaming hub established, where all TV programs for education channels are distributed centrally, standardizing all those things and approving those lessons by the NIE. Then only we give it to television channels that is standardized. Actually, that streaming hub, establishment of a streaming hub was a big milestone. We have all these young graduates working there, and that works quite well. So apart from that, the Dialogue television service providers now has given us 8 dedicated channels for education. And by next month or in 2 months, we will have 2 more channels. So we'll have 10 dedicated channels for education alone. So these are all you can see on Dialogue. They go as NANSL channels. And this will be another breakthrough. Even the pandemic comes again, we are better prepared for it. At least we can reach most of the homes to teach by television and e-tak salava. Then also there was other private service providers. They were also offering various lessons on TV and radio and various other channels. Then the lost learning during the school closure was another issue that we all know. This is a worldwide issue. UNESCO had been talking about it. UNICEF was talking about it. And we, before even they mentioned it, we, together with NIE, our ministry prepared a 100 days learning recovery program for all schools in Sri Lanka. And that is being implemented even now. This will be completed at the end of March. Only we will start the new school year in April. We also prepared home-based learning packages. This is all distributed to all schools. This is actually for children to take it home and do self-study. These are very interesting packages. A lot of creativity came from teachers. Many teachers participated of preparing these things. This is already distributed and it's going on in schools. And that was a good experience for us because we know that now self-learning, preparing self-learning material is a very important step in the educational reforms, because we are not, as I said earlier, we are counting on blended learning mechanism. We are encouraging self-learning because it is important under any circumstances. The child should be able to learn by himself or herself, and the material should be prepared in such a way to facilitate that process. So we have very good set of teachers, over 1,000, I would say, prepared for this thing. And these Dialogue television channels also distribute lessons from 1 to 13, and we are quite sustainable in that manner. The educational reforms goes in a wider circle. We are starting from preschool to then administrative changes, the curriculum changes, and more important is actually school health policy has been revisited. We have formulated the new health policy, and that will be very soon submitted to cabinet for approval. So then we are also setting national schools. This is also important that actually previous speaker, Professor Lin, mentioned that the disparity in society, these 1,000 schools are actually taking care of the inequity in the education sector. Right now, there is so much of inequity in education, and that is seriously addressed. And this COVID pandemic also helped us, because now parents know that children should not travel to school 30, 40 kilometers. they should think of the school closest to their home is better, provides better security for their children. We are also working on teacher development and also making all arrangements for to orient the teachers to blended learning mechanisms, online teaching and all those things, because prior to that, we didn't have any system to train them like that. We are doing all that. Now, actually, we are also trying to link vocational and regular general education together. So these are all happening through distance education mode. Distance education is reaching very high importance in the Ministry of Education. Higher education, I'm not going to touch here because actually that is done by the UGC. I'm not much worried about it also in the pandemic terms, because they are already educated children who are in the higher learning institutes. They are self-learners. They can find learning. Instructions can be followed. I'm really critically worried about the critical group is actually grade 1, 2, 3 primary school children. If we literate them, including preschool, then the part of the problem is resolved. So during the pandemic, we also prepared the preschool policy. And now the country has a preschool policy. Earlier, there was no preschool policy. This has been approved by the government and the National Education Commission, and the cabinet approval has been given. Implementation plans are already prepared. And this is the good thing that happened during pandemic. We did a lot of desk work there to prepare for our changes. Then similarly, educational administrative reforms, a lot of desk work is done, and now they are being implemented. We have made good progress in all educational reforms programs, and I'm happy to say the COVID disturbed a lot of things, but a lot of desk work was done during this period. And as the new online working culture also enabled us to work together for a day. Sometimes I have taken 5-6 Zoom sessions, long ones. Even in the night now, we work on Zoom and various other teams and various other techniques. Sri Lanka also has prepared learning management systems. We demonstrated recently that from Colombo, you can teach to any school in the country once the learning management system is established. Already we have established this new learning management system for 250 schools. Our target is to give every school the internet facility by the end of the year 2022. And blended learning will be introduced. And we believe that, not handling how we did during the pandemic, but how prepared are we for in case of another situation or similar pandemic in the educations, and how education will be conducted during such a period. So I think I have taken the time, so I will stop here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sedere. Heartening to note the kind of work that we have done during the COVID, and such a great deal of information in your presentation on the work done in the education sector during the pandemic, which many of us were not aware. And thank you. We have time for a few questions. The first question actually relates to whether the school closure days has a relationship to the country population. Do you have any information?
Actually, I mean, I can just give a guess answer, but we have not done enough research on these topics. Actually, we should look into these things. Actually, how the demographic features. What we can say is actually definitely Western province was closed longer because the density of population in Western province is very high.
So density is really rather than
Western province was closed longer.
Right. I like to ask Sujata Gamage, who has a question. Can you hear me, Sujata?
Yes, I can.
Please,
Thank you.
please,
Yes.
Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I think Sri Lanka, compared to the region, we always do well. and I think we have an extensive school system. But my one issue is when we hear this data, it's always the supply side. It's from the ministry. Ministry has done this, but what we lack is demand side data. Demand side, that's from the user's point of view. For example, TV programs. Do we know how many, what percent watched, and how effective it was? Sort of surveys we did show that TVs is not really a good way to teach our children, because children need a teacher's intermediary, and without a teacher, students are not going to sit in front of the TV and learn. So I think the demand side data is something I would like to ask Professor Sedere, because we did a household survey of in India, and we mean in Learn Asia, and the numbers are correct. 85% of the students receive some services, but putting internet, the mode as mode is, we don't know. We actually know about 50% received through smartphones, and 30% by physically getting the documents and things like that. So we need more demand side, and I think it's hard because if the ministry asks the teachers, they're not going to school, they're not going to give the correct data. So an independent entity has to do that. Another thing, and then I think the other one is outcomes. So my question to Dr. Sedere is, do we know how many students came back to school, the school census? Because there's UNESCO, everybody says, there's people have just permanently left school. And the other one is, do we have a diagnostic, which is very easy to do? We do these national exams, a diagnostic on basic essential learning outcomes for each grade. I think that tells us best, not from the process data, but at least outcome data from the demand side, the user side. So my question is, would it be possible to very quickly say what percent of our children have come back to school?
Sujata, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sujata, thank you, and very valuable questions. You're very right. I mean, the Sri Lankan system from curriculum to delivery is a centralized administrative model. In education, it's not only in Sri Lanka, it's the same in Bangladesh or Pakistan, India, the South Asia, all countries have education administrative model. This actually, it is very difficult to go away from it. Even though I am concerned of it, you are concerned of it, changing a system is very difficult because the people also have to change with it. Most of the education systems in other countries are demand driven. It is becoming so in Sri Lanka. That is why more international schools are coming up. Parents are seeking education the way that they would wish to have it. But many countries now, even take less developed countries in Africa, today they have a more demand driven education system because even their textbooks are selected by the school. The parents demand various things. We cannot do that. Our people still expect all books should come from the government. It is, it's a long culture, which is very difficult to change. But you are very correct. I share your thoughts the same way because I don't have any ideological battle with you because I also believe that it should be more demand driven. But during the pandemic, in a way, centralized system helped us to deliver goods faster. Because the demand to come, facilities should be available equally everywhere in the country, which is not in the case of Sri Lanka. Because the Western province and urban sector do have the service providers to some extent. But in the rural areas, the schoolhouse is the only place which provides education. Very rarely other things are there. Even the internet cafe is not there. So from that side, we were handicapped. The outcome, the learning, the diagnostic thing that you asked, we have now commissioned a study. It is going on by the Ministry of Education, and I have not seen any results yet. But we were worried about what is the percentage of underachievers now. I'm sure it is increased. There is no doubt because the education and socio-economic status has a very close link. So the people in affluent homes, their parents somehow look after their children. So studies have been done by UNESCO. Some families, they indicated their children learn better or more, about 5% during the COVID pandemic because they could provide the services. But I'm sure the same story is there for the lowest socioeconomic people. I'm afraid that, even some children may have even dropped out. But I told you that we have not done any research. Next school census will indicate to us. Not a full answer, but that's the reality. That's the actual status.
Thank you, Dr. Sedere. Because of the time constraint, we have to take this to a close. And I like once again, thank you for your effort and for the time in spite of your very busy schedule. Thank you, Dr. Sedere.
Thank you very much for the organizers all. It was a lovely conference. Thanks.